everyone, and welcome to this episode of An Ingenious You, the podcast where we speak with higher ed's most creative thinkers and doers. And today I have the great pleasure to be speaking with Michael Alexander, who in 2007 became the 9th president of Lasell University in Boston. Michael came to the role following successful corporate careers, first in media and entertainment, and then in technology, deferring an early desire to enter higher ed leadership. And we're going to go back and ask him about that in just a few minutes. As president, he oversees a unique multi-generational campus, one that includes 2 early education centers and Lasell Village, the first of its kind university-sponsored continuing care retirement community with a learning mandate that has drawn international attention. As we will hear, Lasell has been revitalized in several important ways during Michael's tenure as president. As always, we will include his full bio in the show notes. But for now, Michael, welcome to the Ingenious You community.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
So let's just dive right in. For our listeners, and we have an international listening audience, 15,000 plus, who listen in around the globe. So for those who are not familiar with Lasell, can you provide a high-level overview? In particular, what is your mission? What makes you unique in the world of independent higher ed in particular? And what's the value proposition?
Well, Lasell is one of the oldest institutions, I would say the second oldest institution in the Boston area after Harvard, dating back to 1851, a year before Tufts was founded. It's so it's a venerable institution, been around a long time. It's unusual for a college that old that it's operated without interruption on the same site since it was founded. In other words, didn't take a hiatus during the Civil War or the Depression of 1890 or the First World War like many institutions did. Now, it was founded as a 2-year college for women by a chemistry professor from Williams College, and he had the idea of creating a liberal arts foundation with professional training for women on top of that liberal arts foundation. In some ways, that's still what we are today. We call it different things. It's expanded. It's different, but that legacy still holds true, as you'll hear as I describe kind of what's unique, what our value proposition is. It was a 2-year college for women for most of its history, had its ups and downs like any institution. And in the 70s and 80s, women's colleges kind of went out of favor. 2-year colleges went out of favor. And so it got to be quite small. And then in 1988, a team led by my predecessor, Tom DeWitt, decided to make it a 4-year institution. And then 1998 became a coeducational institution. So really in its current incarnation, it's only 25 years old. So I like to say it's one of the oldest and one of the newest colleges around. In 2019, right before COVID, we became a university to recognize the growing complexity of the institution, the fact that we started graduate programs in 2003, but they didn't really take off till after I came in 2007 and then grow to be something that's a significant part of Lasell. We also have 2 early childhood education programs. So, and we have Lasell Village. And Lasell Village, continuing care retirement community on our campus, that I'm also the CEO of that. So it's co-managed by the university. And it's unique among retirement communities because the residents there are required to participate in at least 450 hours per year of educational coursework or activity. In other words, they're in class almost every day. And there's no other retirement community in the world that has that educational mandate. And that makes it different. And also because it's on our campus, the intergenerational activity between the students and the faculty and the residents of Lasell Village is just incredible. The list of things that go on is 15 pages long, and some of it's, so it's not just being in class together, there's tons of other stuff that goes on. So we like to say that we educate people from 5 months old. We have infants on campus who are learning, and we have those over 100 years old who still go to class every day. So that's a little unusual, if not unique, but it's certainly part of our value proposition, in that people get to really learn about what lifelong learning is, and that there are people 102 years old who are still thirsting for knowledge, and there are infants, a year older or younger, who are just soaking it in like a sponge. So, so that's part of what's unique about us.
What an interesting place. I love the cradle to grave concept in terms of how you deliver education, and boy, what a benefit both for the students who are in class with older folks, but also vice versa. You have been quoted, and you have told the story often of having had a dream of becoming a small college president since you were young. So could you tell us about this, and what's the backstory for that?
It starts when I was about 5 years old, I think, because my grandfather was the vice president dean of the faculty at Antioch College for 30 some years. And I was very close to him. I very like him. Now that I'm, older, I'm losing my hair in the same places. I have his hands and always have. I was very close to him. And so I would spend 6-7 weeks every summer with him in Yellow Springs. In fact, the first year of my life, I lived in the president's house at Antioch College. So I think I was born to it in a way. But my grandfather, I learned a lot from him. I can remember even as a young child, him talking to me about liberal arts colleges and how every small college needs other sources of revenues, right? We hear that all the time. We still talk about that. Lasell Village provides that opportunity, for us, among other things. And so I grew up with that, close to him. He taught me to play ping pong and to play pool, and he taught me about higher education. So it goes, but I'm not sure that I thought I was going to be a college president there. But in college, my freshman year in college, a dean, literally 2 weeks into my first year, took me under his wing and asked me to help him with another student who has what we now call bipolar disease, had dropped out of college the previous year and was trying again, and wanted me to help him keep him in school because he felt if he's so smart, so talented, just kept in school, he'd be able to manage the coursework. And so we worked together, and we succeeded through significant challenges getting him to do that. So this dean then turned me into a peer counselor before there were such things as peer counselor, just like an ad hoc peer counselor. So from my first 3 years in college, I was helping other students that had been identified by this dean who he thought I could benefit from. So, and I kind of grew up through the student affairs side. Then I got married halfway through college. My wife and I became head residents of a house at Tyler House at Smith College, even while I was still an undergraduate. So I was taking my courses at Smith while I was finishing up my thesis at Harvard. And then I went to work at Ohio State. And back at Harvard, I became an assistant dean of freshmen at Harvard for several years. Then at Barnard College, where I was an executive assistant to the president, and ended up responsible for the finance administration of the college. So I was on my way. I knew from while I was an undergraduate, I wanted to be a small college president. Why small college? Because I felt that's where the best education happens, where the small classes matter, where individual attention from full-time faculty, from lots of leadership opportunities. And I'd gone to Harvard, where it was sometimes hard to get into small classes, right? Some of my classes were big, a lot of my classes were big lecture classes. But I went for a year at Smith, where no class was more than 15 students. And it just was, it was more rigorous, more challenging academically. So I always felt that was where the best instruction, the best opportunities happen. And so I tried to take the direct route and went to graduate school in higher education, first Ohio State, then back to the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and with the idea of trying to grow up to be a college president. But life got in the way, as it typically does, and went down this serendipitous path, didn't plan, basically because my wife and I were having trouble coordinating our careers geographically. I ended up following her to Los Angeles, and before I knew what happened, I was working for one of the Hollywood studios. And within a year and a half, they asked me to run a company that was kind of in trouble. And so I managed to turn that around, fix it. USA Network, the cable company in its early years, now a behemoth. And then I ran a TV station, and so it carried on. I was running companies and good at it, so they kept asking me to do it. I really wanted to be a small college president, though. And so I served on a college board until I was term cycled off. I served on a university board, helped to found a couple of foundations that had to do with education. And I read the Chronicle all those 24 years I was running colleges. And then in the last, kind of late in my professional career, maybe just before it was too late, I got lucky and managed to land a job here at Lasell, and I couldn't be happier. I had high expectations by that point, and that's always risky. If you go to a movie and you have high expectations, you're often disappointed, right? But I haven't been. It was even better than I imagined. It's been, the opportunity of a lifetime for which I'm very grateful.
What a terrific thing to be able to say at this point. As you've announced your retirement, you're going to be stepping out of the role at the end of this year. But I am struck by all of the experiences that you accumulated, that you brought with you to the role. And I can only imagine what those experiences in tandem have given you in terms of your ability to maneuver and to lead during what, as you know, better than most, has been an increasingly challenging environment. So fascinating. So I'm going to come back and ask you about that in a minute, but I want to ask you to dig a little bit deeper in terms of your experience at Lasell. So you've now been in this dream role for 16 years?
Almost 16 years, yeah.
Almost 16 years. I would love to have you do a bit of a post-mortem assessment of how it's gone for you and for Lasell. So for example, tell us a little bit about what you found when you first arrived in 2007, and how are things different now as a result of your leadership over these 16 years?
Well, as I mentioned before, Lasell had gotten quite small in the 80s and even into the 90s. By the time it went co-ed in 1998, there were about 600 students. When I arrived in 2007, it was still trying to build from there, but it had solidified. It had kind of created a foundation, so it had a break-even budget, but they were used to pinching pennies. They were being very careful for many, many years. And I thought that the college, it was a college then, was poised to take some risks, to make some investments, to try and grow and develop more quickly. Lasell Village even was only 7 years old at that time. So the graduate program had 40 students at that time. So I thought there was a lot of opportunity. And I wouldn't say it was just my leadership, it was a team effort, right? As it always is. There was a great team that I managed to keep most of them on for a long time. The faculty was small, but we were fortunate in being able to hire more faculty every year, and going through a period, even during the Great Recession, we managed to grow and accumulate resources. And so we were on had a great run for my first 10 or 12 years. And I think that, what's key to that, one of the things you're talking about, the range of experience I had before, one of the keys to that is I kind of learned what leadership was about back then. And the most important piece of that is understanding how to get people marching in the same direction after a common goal for common purposes. That's really, when you boil it down, that's what leaders do. And I learned how to do that. And so one of the ways to do that is through strategic planning. And I kind of had an expertise in that area. And we don't do it in the same way. We do it very quickly. The strategic plan takes a couple of months to do, and it's really written and finished in over a 3-day weekend. So by my fourth month here, the board had approved a new plan. We're now on our fourth plan. We've completed 3 plans, of which we've completed 95% or more of the objectives. And we have certain rules about how we do it so that it's beneficial. And that's has driven us in the community forward, because everybody knew what it was. Everybody signed up to make sure it happened. So that's getting marching in the same direction for a common goal, for a common purpose. So the graduate program, depending on how you count, how many are registered this term or how many are active, unduplicated students, is 600 or 700 students. The undergraduate program grew, fell back a little bit during COVID, but proliferated more programs, more sports and athletics. I mean, pretty much everything. The campus was not in bad shape, but it looked kind of tired, and we were able to spit that up and got it to the point where we literally have almost no deferred maintenance on our campus, which is extremely unusual. The sciences were small. There were two programs, two allied health programs here when I came, athletic training and exercise science. And athletic training was established, exercise science is still small. Well, we built that up. We now have 10 programs in the sciences, undergraduate alone, 4 more graduate programs that are thriving and growing. Even during COVID, those continued to grow significantly. We built a science and technology center. So I think one of the things I'm proudest about that's happened here is that we've become broader in our offerings, but particularly in the STEM fields, which is, let's face it, that's where the action is these days. We grew up to become a university, so it's just a much more complex, more all-serving kind of institution.
I'm curious, what has surprised you about, was there anything that has surprised you about the small college president's role? Anything you didn't expect?
Actually, no.
No?
When you run 24, run companies for 24 years, and some of those got to be pretty significant in size, you pretty much encounter all the kinds of problems you're going to have. You know what to do if you have a sexual harassment case, or you have a breach in your IT systems. You kind of know what to do. And a lot of people come through the academic ranks, don't know about those things. You learn about leadership and how to. So nothing surprised me. I knew that I had things to learn on the fundraising side, so I set out to do that early. I didn't know anything about the retirement community business, but I had taken over several companies in the past where I didn't know the industry before I took it over, and was successful. So I was able to learn that quite quickly. I think there are things I learned, however, many things I learned, maybe not surprised. So one of the thing I learned and know and still believe is that the cost of attendance is still the biggest problem in higher education. It became a bigger problem while I was here and remains the #1 problem. And so it's not all wine and roses at colleges like ours or Bay Path. Figuring out how to support students and keeping yourself accessible to students across the socioeconomic spectrum, across a range of high school preparation is a very challenging thing to figure out how to do. We recognized at Lasell as early as 2011 that we had to prepare for the fact that it was difficult for people to pay, to come up with the money. Even people would start, 60% of our attrition, the people we lose because they can't keep paying. And I don't think that's atypical. But it's something we haven't solved at Lasell or as an industry. So we've been working at that assiduously ever since, and at least we've been trying things. And I don't think we've broken the code yet. We have an experimental program called Lasell Works, which is a lower cost way to attend Lasell. Unfortunately, the experiment got interrupted by COVID, so it's very hard to evaluate how well it worked. I'm credited with founding the Low-Cost Models for Independent Colleges Consortium. But really, there were 3 of us, and Carol Leary, Bay Path, was one of them, who was there right at the beginning. But that's an effort to work with now 135 colleges around the country to figure out how to lower the cost so much that we could pass that through to students and their families in the form of lower prices. And we have developed certain efficiencies and ways to lower costs, but not enough to really pass it through in the lower prices yet. Maybe it's helped us keep down prices a little, but not in terms of, are we really, and we're determined, we're still determined to figure out how to lower the cost that people actually have to pay out of their pocket by 30 to 40%.
Yeah, which is significant. Yeah,
that's significant, and because that's what it's going to need. I mean, for people to be able to pay for this, rather than having to go to a less expensive institution with large classes where you can get lost, where you don't necessarily have a faculty mentor. Everybody at Lasell has a faculty mentor by the time they graduate. Everybody does an internship that's been vetted and monitored. You can't get that at a state institution. Not everybody, not even close to everybody. So, I think we have a real challenge as in the higher ed community, that institutions like ours could fade away could dwindle, and then our families and students would have fewer choices. And for many students, this is a better choice. And if it's not available, then the whole system of higher education in the United States will be diminished. And that's my nightmare. That's what I see as a concern for the industry. That's rooted in analysis of the financing of the whole system. So there are multiple reasons for how we got here, but we're here, and we have to figure out an answer for it. At the same time that the number of high school graduates is declining and about to decline more severely. So it's there are significant challenges that we face, even when you identify them. Figuring out how to resolve those issues is a real challenge.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you brought up this topic, because you are widely recognized as an expert on the financing of higher education. I'm glad you mentioned the LCMC, the Lower Cost Models for Independent Colleges Consortiums. I had the privilege when I was provost, working with Carol Leary, of sitting in on some of those early meetings, and it was quite remarkable to have. At the time, it was a small group. As you said, it's grown to be a much bigger group. But it was really remarkable to sit around the table with colleagues from other institutions and to be brainstorming about solutions to a common problem. And I was struck by the fact that people were able to put aside their individual institutional concerns, which is not always easy for folks to do, and to think more collaboratively about how we could come up with some solutions. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about some of the things that you learned from the initiative. What things seemed most promising, or with the advantage of hindsight, what are the things that you think are most workable as part of the solution for the long run, and maybe what things didn't work as well?
Well, when we started, and still, there are two main objectives to the Lower Cost Models Consortium. One is just to support each other in our experiments for programs that would make going to college less expensive. So like our Lasell Works program, like early college programs, and dual degree programs, like partnerships between a college and a hospital in order to provide a lower cost nursing program. So really about, and so what we do is support each other, provide constructive criticism, help people come over the impediments that you always get when you have such radical change, to provide moral support to each other. And we've done that. It's now been since 2015, almost 8 years in. It is 8 years in now. And so we, the presidents still talk about this stuff, frequently, at least once a year, often twice a year, and share our ideas, our experiences. Ultimately, we hope to share data and have people identify successful programs and see if somebody else can replicate it. And there have been some really creative things done at Houghton College, at St. Joseph, Maine, I would hope at Lasell, and many colleges around the country that have been experimenting. So that's one, is just to help people with their own experiments at ways to provide the special kind of education we small colleges offer at lower cost. The second was to do programming together, to combine our forces to try and do programming that by spreading the cost of development and delivery across a bunch of institutions would be less expensive. And we did that first by developing a certified financial planning program, which was and still is very successful and is available to all our members. And then we developed a platform for course sharing called RISE. And that was designed in a way to help institutions either start or maintain majors at very low cost. The startup cost for a new major traditionally is very expensive. You have to hire faculty and equipment and space and get people oriented, and then slowly build up the number of students. Through RISE, you can do it at little or no cost, and you break even at very few new students. So if you add 4 or 5 more majors that add 5 students per year each, that can be 100 or more students in a small college. That can be that can be significant. So, and it can provide more opportunities for your college that may disadvantage you relative to a big university that has hundreds of programs. So, so those have been the two main things: course development and sharing, and supporting each other in their programs. So, what's worked? I think we have supported each other. We are a community of presidents and provosts and others who have supported ourselves through those ideas and who have learned from each other, and helped each other overcome resistance, in particular when you're trying to start something that's a lot different than anything you've done before. And the RISE platform is growing every semester like crazy. It's literally every semester, the more and more students and institutions taking advantage of it. So now it'll have to grow considerably more before it actually has enough effect to reduce the cost 30 or 40%. But there is a point at which that could happen. So it is part of the movement that recognizes that we have to teach in a different way. In order to lower the cost, you either have to change the student faculty ratio, or you have to teach in significantly different ways than what's been traditional. And we're trying to figure out how to do that without giving up the advantages of the small independent college, small class sizes, individualized relationships with faculty mentors, leadership opportunities, the things that being part of a community that really supports personal growth as well as intellectual and academic growth.
Now, you have recently made the news for your cost reduction announcement there at Lasell. And according to the website, your all-in cost for most students beginning next year is less than $40,000. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
So,
39.5. Yep.
So I think I know why you're doing this based on what you've just said, but I'm curious. I'm sure others will be as well when they read that and wonder, how can you make it work? How are you making it work from a fiscal perspective?
Well, whether it works, we'll have to wait and see, right? It doesn't start till next fall. And I will answer your question, but it does go, as you implied, it goes back to this determination to find a way to lower the cost and make it more accessible. Colleges like ours that don't have huge endowments, we give tremendous amounts of financial aid, right? But we still don't meet all the need of our students. Almost everybody, except for those from high-income families, have an unmet need. And that just means it's going to be difficult when they get here. How are they going to buy books? They've already used their last penny to pay tuition. How are they going to, buy pizza? How are they going to consider studying abroad, which is so important in personal development and maturation? So, how, we gotta break through that. And so we're determined, right? So it drives out of that determination to lower the cost. So we decided that during COVID, our undergraduate enrollment did go down somewhat. We were definitely hurt by COVID. So we have some available beds. And so we said, this is the opportunity. We couldn't have done this 6 years ago because every bed, we were oversubscribed so this is our opportunity. So the idea is to help families understand that that they can pay if they go through and find out what financial aid is available, what other support's available, the dream of going to an institution like this where you develop close relationships, where you live at close quarters with strangers, where you get a lot of faculty support, where you have intergenerational opportunities with Lasell Village, is open to you if you go through it. So from a financial point of view, what you're hoping for is that you'll get more applications and that you'll get attention. Lasell College, as venerable as it is, as long as it's been around with all its accomplishments, is not that well known. Its visibility is not that great outside of its local reach. And so when we announced it, we did get tremendous publicity. Over 30 articles, television spots, radio spots. Earned media was incredible, and we're still getting it. It still got mentioned yesterday in the local press here. So so we got that attention. Now that won't last forever, but still, any institution, any business can benefit from that. And our applications are way up. In fact, we have a record number of applications in the whole history of Lasell this year. And it's not like they're weaker. the academic standing of those students is stronger. It appears to be stronger based on the criteria we normally use to evaluate. So we expect there are going to be more students to choose from, and that it's going to benefit our incoming class next year and years beyond. We know that for it to succeed, you have to market it properly, not just market it as a tuition reduction, but a tuition reduction for what? So you got to combine that with, and you can't, and that what can't be 5 different things. Like I've tried to explain to you 100 different things about Lasell, but I think the thing that our students are telling us is special to them, that from their point of view, the value proposition is that they get up to be part of this close, warm, caring community that looks out for each other, that celebrates each other's victories, that comes to each other's aid in times of need, or when something weird happens in the world. We pull together. And that is an environment that the students will tell you facilitates their personal growth, allows them to grow as people, as whole persons, in addition to the academic and intellectual development that takes place, which it does like in other small colleges, to be honest. But what makes it special is the kind of community we have, where people can speak their own voice. Students can speak their own voice and expect to be heard. That's one of the things they'll talk about. So that's what we're trying to market, promote, and help people understand that we have this tuition reduction. That means you should look at us because you may be able to afford this, even though you think you might not. If you just thought it was going to cost $60,000, which is what it otherwise would have been for next year, $39.5. Come and look at us and find out if it's the right place for you, so that you can access that special kind of education that we provide, the special community that you can be a part of and benefit from. So that's the way we're going about it, and what we're hoping will be the result. We won't know until next fall, or really based on others who have done it before. You got to look 3 years down the road. It's got to work for like 3 years. And so you got to be prepared to market it that way for 3 years, which we are. So we've got a 3-year marketing plan in place, and that's what we think. But it does accomplish the fact that some students will pay less. Some students will make it easier for them to continue. We should attract some more transfer students because of the lower cost, and the fact that that they will get the same amount of financial aid. Unlike what traditionally happens in a college like ours, they'll get the same amount of financial aid as someone who started here. So that's a little bit different. It just means the net out of pocket is going to be lower, and we think that if we can make that work, if we get enough additional new students to counteract the reduction in the price.
From a financial perspective, I assumed that you've got some number or range in your head in terms of what you need to enroll above and beyond to make it work financially. And so
you'd be surprised, the break even is 24 additional students.
No kidding.
Yeah. Now there's a lot of reasons for that. You have to get way down into the details to understand why that is. But for instance, we have we have 0 full pay students. And at the undergraduate level, that's true of almost all the colleges in the Lower Cost Models Consortium. Almost all of them have 0 full pay students, especially of those who enter as first-year students in the fall. There might be some transfer students, some international students who are full pay, but of the domestic first-time full-time students, no, everybody's getting some financial aid from the institution.
So let me change the subject here for a moment and ask you about something else that put you in the news a few years ago. And that is the aborted merger discussions between Lasell and Mount Ida. So from the outside looking in, this seemed like a potentially positive move for both schools. So can you tell us something about what went wrong and any learning takeaways for other leaders who are currently contemplating mergers or formal alliances of one kind or another?
Unfortunately, I can't tell you why it didn't happen. I think you're right. It would have been positive for both institutions. I'm still convinced of that. I always was and still am. Literally went to the 11th hour, 59 seconds. And, you know, at a Mount Ida board meeting where we thought they were going to take the final step to commit to the deal, they came out of that meeting and terminated the deal. Big surprise. To this day, I don't know why. And the reasons that have been expressed publicly, I know not to be accurate. So I don't really know why. I can speculate, but I don't have great evidence to support my speculation. So so it's a mystery and a disappointment in my life, because if that had gone through, the Mount Ida students would have still been there, would still be there today. The faculty would still be there today. Not all the staff would be there, but the faculty and the students would still be there. And we'd be a stronger institution, a larger, stronger institution, but still small and still the kind of education we provide. So it's a shame. Now, that's not to say it didn't learn a lot of things. And those weren't the only efforts I've had to try and affiliate with other institutions. One thing we did wrong and clearly affected the last minute, the trauma of a last minute pullout was we tried to keep it secret too long. You know, we worked on that thing for 1.5 years, and you know, Mount Ida was naturally concerned that if it got out and then it didn't happen, that they would be injured if it didn't go forward. So they wanted to keep it confidential. Well, we kept it confidential way too long. It was only a month between the time we announced it and dealt with the reaction and when they pulled out. Whereas if we announced it earlier, I think it would have had more time for people to get used to it, to cross all the kind of regulatory and approval hurdles you have to get. And so I think we were too careful. I know from multiple discussions, being involved in multiple discussions of these kinds of events, people try and time the discussion to thinking there's a perfect time to announce it so it won't affect the enrollment cycle, right? Well, that may be, but to delay such an announcement for that reason it makes it less likely that you're going to complete a deal. I've learned if something's not going to work, you want it to fall apart sooner rather than later. There's a lot of time and investment and energy and legal fees in going down that road if it doesn't complete. In this case, there were really bad implications because or ramifications, because Mount Ida turned around and announced closing the college a week later and selling the property to UMass Amherst. And that created a huge uproar, which now created more legislation and regulatory oversight of private colleges in Massachusetts, spreading throughout New England now, that has affected all of us in unfortunate ways. So it's just too bad what happened. So there's a lot to learn from it. But why did it not happen? I still don't know.
So I'm going to ask you to take out your crystal ball here. And if you were going to create a game plan for success for the next president of Lasell, what would the key bullet points be?
Well, we may have covered some of those, like the one we just talked about. I think I would be looking, I've been looking for partners, almost completed that one since at least 2015. Again, COVID got in the way and shut down all discussions for 2.5, 3 years. But they're starting up again now. And so I would say, keep your eyes open, have an open mind. Don't be too rigid in what you think are your needs. Because when you create a partnership, both sides have to give, and it has to be based on trust and compatibility. So I would say keep your mind open. Two, I think the cost of attendance problem isn't going away. The number of high school graduates going down. The competition to be more intense. So will people just continue to ramp up their financial aid and make it more difficult? I don't know. If the institution don't close, then probably yes, and that means everybody will be losing money, and they won't be able to start new initiatives. They won't be able to fight off deferred maintenance on their campuses. There'll be serious ramifications. Be understaffing. There'll be serious ramifications if that happens. So, and the big ramification is that the reason higher education in the United States is considered the strongest system in the world is because of its diversity. And I don't mean just the diversity of students, I mean the diversity of institutions. You have the flagship state institutions are wonderful research institutions, the big well-endowed private research institutions. You have the state institutions, you have branch campuses, and then you have the private colleges, which gives students many different options for how to obtain an education, how to grow and develop, how to be able to afford it, whether to live at home or live on campus or work while you're going to school. There are all these different options. And if some of those options go away, will we still be the strongest system of higher education in the world? I'm concerned. I don't think so. So I think the cost of attendance we have to continue to attend to. I think we have to be open to different ways of teaching. We have to continue. The new president is going to have to again adapt to new technology. I had to do that throughout my corporate career and my higher education career. Always new technology to have to adapt to. One of the companies I ran, a technology company, participated in that. We were one of the companies that created the internet to begin with, and so it's but what's coming down there, virtual reality, is that really going to affect how we teach, and is that going to impose itself on our educational lives like online learning did? What about artificial intelligence? No doubt in my mind that's going to affect it. You can see even in the last few weeks it's affected it, and that's just the beginning. So we're going to have to figure out how to adapt to technology. A lot of us who run institutions, let's face it, we're from another generation, several generations behind. And if we succeeded in roles like mine, you've had to adapt to technology, but you have to, you got to do it again. You got to, the next people, the next team are going to have to do it again and figure out how do we adjust, how do we adapt, how do we invest in the resources you need to take advantage of the new technology and not be left behind. How do you do that without making it more expensive for students to attend? These are real challenges that the next president is going to have to face.
Well, you've partially answered one of my final questions. I did want to ask you to reflect on what you think it takes to be a successful president these days, and what the most essential ingredients are for a successful presidency. So anything else that you would add?
So, because as much as life evolves around us and we have to adapt and change, and that's one thing, the president has to be a change agent, has to be stirring the pot, has to be the one who, recognizing that your community and the community around you finds change difficult, produces anxiety and uncertainty, but you have to help people learn how to live with that anxiety and uncertainty, because change has to happen. The world's changing, so organizations have to change. I always say, if an organization never stays the same, it either gets better or gets worse. So to get better, you have to change. And so the leader's job is to change, is to create that change, just to get the team working, to keep moving forward. And that relates to what I talked about before, that the essential skill a good leader has is to get everybody marching in the same direction for a common purpose towards common goals. And then there are other details, to be a successful leader, and I think most successful leaders you'll see now do this. This wasn't true 50 years ago. You have to be a delegator. You have to allow people to make their own decisions throughout your organization at every level. To do that, you have to have an open environment. You have to really make sure everybody knows everything about the institution, that there's almost nothing that's secret other than things that are confidential to an individual or a health or a kind of corporate activity at the early stages. But other than that, the leader's goal is to try and make sure everybody has all the information they need. And your job is to support the people who work with you, to help them have the information, the resources, the training, and the moral support that allows them to take advantage of their skills and experiences to their greatest degree. And so those are kind of key elements. that I think are important. Sense of humor helps a lot. And then I guess the final thing I would say, which is often the final thing I said, is it also helps to be kind, and to promote kindness. I don't think there's any more powerful thing in the world than figuring out how to be kind to everybody, and we're in the business of finding and sharing, disseminating the truth. We should also be in the business of helping people understand how to relate to each other. And there's no reason why we can't spread kindness throughout the world. If we could do that, if everyone were kind, it would solve a lot of our problems. So I often say, I ask people to be kind to all the people and all the creatures of the earth, and to the earth itself.
So what are you going to most miss about the presidency?
Well, obviously the people, the people that I work with, the students. My office is in the library on the second floor. So I get to walk through clouds of students every day, except during COVID, but normally. And so I get to see them grow and develop in front of my eyes. And they grow so fast, their growth moves faster than the hands on a clock. It's which it's moving, but you can't see it. Well, this you can actually see it. It's really amazing to feel that. That's my everyday reward for the work that presidents work all the time, often every day of the week, often till 10 o'clock every night. And our reward is seeing those students grow and develop, to believe that we have some hand in that growth, whether it's in indirect ways through our administrative responsibilities or in direct ways in our interactions with students. That's what that's what all of us here are into it for. So the relationships with the students, with the faculty, with the staff, with the trustees, the alumni. Oh, look at all the great people you meet through alumni, and the people at Lasell Village, who are an extraordinary group of people. That kind of stimulation, daily stimulation, and human interaction is obviously the thing that I'll miss the most.
Boy, deeply impactful and meaningful. So do you have plans beyond the next few months, or are you going to take it as it comes?
Everybody asks me that, and I try to avoid it. And not only try to avoid answering it, I try to avoid thinking about it.
Okay.
The first thing I'm going to do is support my family. My wife and daughter asked me to retire now rather than a couple of years from now, which is one of the first reason among several why I decided to retire now. And the first thing I'm going to do is, because we got separated during COVID, and my wife and I have been together 55 years, not so much the last 2.5, and that's not good. It's just not cool. So that's the first thing I'm going to change and fix. And then I'll figure out from there what to do. I'm not going to sit on my hands. I'm not going to be retired. I know that. So I'll find something to keep me busy, something where I feel like I'm being productive. I want to continue to find some way to contribute to society. It may not be as good as being a college president, but just some way to keep my hand in, feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. I'll figure out something. I just don't know yet what it'll be.
Yeah, well, I have no doubt you will not be idle. And you have such great, rich, deep experience that I hope you'll find a way to pass that on, maybe through teaching or some formal leadership development with up and coming leaders, because that experience is really, really valuable. So we have a signature question we ask of every guest. This is the last question. What educational innovation or new idea has captured your attention? Something that you are especially excited about and hopeful for?
Well, this week, that could be a question that you answer differently depending on what you're thinking about at the moment. But this week, the artificial intelligence stuff, the chat GPT stuff is all out there. And it so happened that around the year 2000, I was working at this technology company that had very high technology at the time and was doing very advanced things. And I partnered up with the professor at Harvard, whom I known for a long time, all the way from back when I was assistant dean, that ran the expository writing program. So we tried to develop a natural language processor that would grade or provide feedback to this first year students' papers. The same way that we had learned, I taught expository writing, I taught creative writing. We had to do, page, person by person, page by page, and then sit with them and explain to them, what they did right, what they did wrong, how they could build and improve their writing. Is there some way we could get computers to help us do that? And we've been reading about natural language processing. So we tried we were ahead of our time. Couldn't quite do it. Well, guess what? Now you can do it. And on beyond that, the natural language processing that has turned into things like ChatGPT have clearly advanced way above what we even imagined back then. So I can, everybody's worried about it, about how are we going to control it? How are we going to prevent it from being used for people to plagiarize their papers and we don't even know? But I think about all the ways we could use it to enhance our educational delivery, ways to maybe lower costs, to skip the drudgery work for faculty and go right to the fun stuff, the content, how do you evoke emotional response? How do you create a story that people will lose themselves in? And if you take, the grammar, solve the grammar problem, then you can concentrate on that stuff. So and that's just the beginning of all the things I could think about that might be possible. And I'm sure the ChatGPT is just the tip of the iceberg, right? So there's going to be a lot more. And yeah, it's like every development technology is a two-edged sword, right? Email is a two-edged sword, let's face it, right? Great productivity tool, takes up way too much of our time, right? And so like any new technology, I'm sure it's a two-edged sword. And so we have to figure out how to protect the negative aspects of it and how to take advantage of the positive aspects. I'm kind of a glass 3/4 full person. So right now, I would say this week, that's the one I'm thinking about. And I think the more I think about it, and the more I look at its capabilities, I say, well, that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So it'll be exciting to see where it goes and how it develops. So, Michael, I am so grateful for your time and for this conversation. I've been inspired. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners will too. So thank you again for your service to higher ed. And I know you're not done. So we'll look to see what the next chapter in your journey will bring.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our time together.